Good morning, all. Good morning, all. So today we are going to be talking about CSS. I've earlier looked about JavaScript and HTML, which is the backbone of a website. So today we'll be looking at CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheet. And the things we are going to be running quickly in CSS, we'll talk about font size, font variant, border, color, and width. So we'll look at things like we'll look at font size, variant, border, width, height, and float. And later in the course we'll jump into what we call CSS3, which is an advanced version of what CSS. We'll look at CSS3. We'll talk about some properties found in CSS3. Okay, let's go and start coding. So I'll head over to the file we're using the other day, which is test file. Let me just copy this. Let me just move this over. Let me move this over here. Move this over to the desktop so we can be able to get it easy access from here. So I'm going to open this with my editor, which is Visual Studio Code I've been using. Now I have made a template already, a body template, so we can make use of it. So last section classes we had, a physical class we had, I said CSS can be run in three ways, either at the title, that is the internal CSS, where you run the CSS at your head section or inside the head tags, or you can have inline CSS where you run inside your HTML tags or elements, and you can also have what external CSS. Okay, let's dive into that, and here they go. So the first thing I want to point out here is let me use PowerPoint. Let me just have a new slide here, blank slide. Let me write down something here. Okay, let me get back here. Seems to be having an issue. Now let's have something like this, H1. Let's just call it H1. Let me explain something here. And we have something like this. So we have color. So let's say we have color. The color is orange. Are you seeing this? Now let's say this color is orange. Now let me explain something. This H1 here is called what? The selector. And this color is identified as what? The color here, this color is identified as what? The property. And this orange is called the value. The orange here is called what? The value. So H1, let me highlight that again. H1 is called the H1 is called the selector. The color is called what? The property, and orange is called what? The value. Let me jump quickly into that so we can begin to see that into action. Let's just jump right into that. So let's say I have an HTML heading. Let's say I have heading here. Let's say I have an HTML heading, say H1, and I called it Skill Hub 2021 web design and programming course. Now if I have this, then I save this. So if I go to desktop now and I open this, Now you can see what we have here as H1. Now let me just minimize this so we can begin to refresh that whenever we come over. So this is what we have here. Now I can begin to apply what my CSS. These are two ways I'm going to show you. First of all, here we can apply our CSS at the head tag. So before you apply your CSS, you do what we call what? You add the style. Are you saying style? Now I'm going to call that H1. H1 is what? The selector. I'm going to call for H1. H1. Are you seeing? So let me just use a small case. H1. I'm going to call for H1. And I'm going to do color. Let's go for orange. So that is what I've done. Now if I save my document here, save, and I return here, if I refresh, see what you have. Are you seeing the colors automatically change? Okay, that is that about color. Let's play around with this. Let's add something else. Let's go with so I said we are going to touch we have done font. Let's do font size. Let's see what font size gives us. Let's touch let's remove color and go with font size. Font size. So let's say we want our font size to be, font size cannot be orange, right? So we're going to change it. Let's say our font size can be, let's say let's just go 45 pixel. 45 pixel. So in terms of size, the size can be in centimeter or it can be in ems. So let me refresh this. Oh, sorry, I didn't save this, so it's not saved. So remember to always save your document, your HTML document. So are you seeing this is a font size of what? 45. Look at how big it is. Now if I have to change this font size to maybe, let's say let's go with 12. Make sure you save. Now if I refresh this is what we have. I see, this is what we have here. Now let me keep that aside and let's move further. So the next property we should test out is let's test out the border property and the width property. Let's see the border property. Border. Let's have a border of let's have border of black. Let's have border of let's say one pixel. Let's save that. Okay, you're seeing that. Let's have a border of let's say red 1 pixel. Save that. So let's have it. Okay, let me increase it to 2. There's something I want to point out here. Now notice I've been refreshing and nothing changes. That is simply because you cannot add a border to a text. Actually, you can't really add a border to a text, but you can add a border to what? To let's say a box. Let's say when we are doing box, when we are doing navigation bar, you see the border I'm talking about. Let's just make progress here. Let's add something like let's add margin. Let's just work with margin and also line height. Let's work with margin. Let me check our document here. So the next thing we have is a float. Okay, let's talk about float. So let's work with float. So float here, we have float. Now notice the options I'm getting here. I can float to the left, or I can float to the right, or I can float to the onset initial. Let's work with the left and save that document. Make sure you save. So if I refresh this, notice something changed here. It has flowed to the what? To the left. All of it has come to the left. Now if I have to go back now and make it to flow to the right, to the right. We're going to have this. Notice it has moved all to the right. That is flow to the right. Okay, so those are the few elements we have. So what I want us to do right now is that I want us to play around with, I want us to do a mini project right now. So we're going to do a navigation bar. We're going to build a simple navigation bar with HTML. So by the end of that navigation bar, we should be able to touch some many other HTML properties. So let me get right onto there so we can make progress. So let's just create a navigation bar with HTML. So the first thing we're going to have is we're going to create a div. So let's take away all of that. So the first thing we're going to have is that we're going to create a div. We're going to have a div. I've said before that a div is just a container wherever that thing comes in. So we're going to have a div, a bigger div, and we're going to have this div. We're going to give this div a name called a class. So we're going to call it class. I said class is just a way of identifying them with CSS. So class, let's just say we're calling it maybe let's say we're calling it top nav bar, top nav, can leave it like that, or top nav bar, which. So inside this div we can have an active class, or let's just leave the active class away. Let's just have an href. Let's have an href. Let's have an href. Now in this href we'll call home. For those of you who attended the HTML class, I said href is like a link. So we're going to have links inside the navbar, because your navbar will have a link. So let me just copy all of this. Let me copy this and paste this multiple times. So I can change this. Let's say we're going to have this first one we call we can call it news. News. The next one we can call it contact. And let's have this one. Let's call that about. Okay. Remember, we are trying to build a nav bar here, a navigation bar. Now, if we save our code as it is right now, let me take away the H1. So if we save our code like as it is right now and run our page, we're going to have it in a straight line. So this is what we have, I see. Now if you click on this link, now notice what's going to happen. They want to take me to a different page, and that's what we don't want for now. See, you want to refresh, but there are no links there, so it's not going to anywhere. So if I needed to add links, I would just need to add links here. For example, if I wanted to go to a particular home, I can add a link here. Okay, so if I click on it now, it can be able to take me to somewhere. Okay, now the next thing we can do right now, this is our home page. The next thing we can do right now is let's begin to work on our home page. Let's begin to work on it now. Let's begin to style our home page. Let's begin to style our navbar. The first thing we can have is that, because I use class, this class I called here, and I gave the class a name called what? Top navbar. I'm going to be able to identify that class in the CSS section. So because I use a class, I can call it what? Dot top nav bar. Are you see? And I can begin to open now. And whatever I put here is going to affect only what? The top nav bar is going to affect only it. If I decide to remove this and I put ID, if I put ID, that means when I come here, I'm going to put a hash symbol. I think it's going to do the same thing. Okay, let's just return back and use class. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to add here is that I want us to have a background color, because notice the first div here is what? This is this div called navbar is the one who covered the whole of what, everything from here, home to about. This div called navbar, he is the owner of what, this, the whole this section like this. So first of all, I need to add the background color so we can be able to identify. So I'm going to have a background color of now actually the way we put background colors, we can actually use numbers or we can use hex code. Hex code simply means that a combination of what, numbers and letters. Okay, so but for now, if you don't study, you don't know hex code, I can give you a link. I'll drop a link where you can be able to go and study some hex code, or you can just simply use the numbers, the letters as it is by the color and begin to what, type them. Okay, so let's have a navbar. Let's say a navbar should be let's go with let's just go with the background color of, let's say, hash 33. Let me just go with this one, 33. Let me save this. Save this. And now if I refresh this, I see we have this is the background color right now. Okay, let me go return back to that. And then an S here. Now let me take it to something you can understand. Let me put gray. So now back and gray. Let me see, refresh that, and if I run this, okay, you are seeing now. So an is what, it's a gray color. So this is what we have here, over here. So the next thing I want to add here is I want to add overflow. Overflow is simply to show us the item and we can scroll right through them. So our overflow is simply to show us the item. So overflow is a CSS property. It's a CSS property that enables us to show us the item that we have and we can be able to scroll through those items. So we're going to have overflow. Let me take this overflow. Now I'm going to have overflow hidden. Let me hide the overflow. So I'm going to save this and refresh. Now when I refresh, now let's say I had overflow auto so that you can see what auto will do. Auto. Now you might, okay. Overflow scroll. There's also overflow scroll. Now notice what happened to overflow scroll. You're having something like a scroll button here. See, it wants to scroll. Okay, so let's return back. So let's go back. We are saying overflow hidden. Hidden means that we don't want to see the scroll. Okay, I said what overflow does is that it shows all the items and we can be able to scroll right through it if we want to use a scroll. So we have produced overflow hidden. Now that is that. We are done with our top navbar. Now let's begin to pick those elements separately and begin to identify them. So the first element we're going to pick is we're going to talk about top navbar. And the person we're going to pick on that top navbar is what? The A tag. The href tag. This A tag here, we're going to pick these A tags. These A tags. I'm going to pick these A tags. So now I want to talk about these A tags. Let's begin to style those A tags, because if you pick just one A, top navbar A, it can be able to what? Style every other thing here. So let's progress on that. Next thing we're going to have is we're going to, so let's add a float. Let's have a float, add a float. So let's add a float to the left. So our navbar should be able to what? Float to the left. Let's refresh that. I see everything has flowed to the left. Okay, it has flowed to the left. Now let's add in some color, or let's just make let's add some color, or let's add text align. Text align is a property where it's going to align our text at the center. If you have done Microsoft Word before, you should know what is an alignment of text. I refresh this. Okay, So we have aligned our text is at the center here. So the next thing we're going to have now is we're going to add some color so that our text will have a color. Let's say we add a color of white. Okay, let's just go with white. Add a color of white. So that's the color of white. Okay. So the next thing now we can add is we're going to add padding. What does padding do? Padding actually creates a space in between what the elements. So we're adding padding. So we're adding padding of, let's say, 14 pixels. So you can play around with this padding, please. So after watching this tutorial videos, please play around with the padding and try other paddings and see what it does. So in padding, actually what happens in padding, that padding has 4 sections. We have the top padding, we have the right padding, and the bottom padding. Okay, let me remove all of this so I can clear this together so we can understand. So we have the top padding. Let's say I'm putting a padding of 13 pixels. I have another padding of, let's say, 13 pixels. Let me explain this. And let's have another padding of 13 pixels. Let me just have another padding of 20 pixels. And let me explain all of this. The first padding of 13 pixels here, the first padding of 13 pixels, the first one of 13 pixels where I'm hovering over right now, 13 pixels, is called the top padding. And the one of what? The second 13 pixels is called the right padding. And the third one is called the bottom padding. And the last one is called what? The left padding. So the way padding works is kind of like confusing at times. So let me refresh all of this. This is what we have. Are you seeing now? So this is what we have. So the first one, not actually this home button, but this first padding of 13 pixels actually works on the top. It gave me a padding, a space from the top of 13 pixels, and the second 13 pixels is what, at the bottom. So it gave me a space from the bottom of what, from the right. So this one, so the top one, this space you see from here, from the top here, the space you have from the top here was the first 13 pixels. 13 pixels of 13 pixels of 13, it works at the top. So it gave me a 13 pixel space from the top, and the second one gave me a 13 pixel space from the right. See, if you check at the right here, there's some spaces here, 13 pixel space from the right, and the other one gave me 13 pixel space from the bottom and 20 pixel space from the left. So let's return back. And so if you don't need to use that pattern of putting 4 values, you can actually go with what, 2 values. In fact, you can actually go with one self. You can just put maybe 1 value and say the rest auto. Okay, you can say auto. So I can just come and say, okay, 13 pixels here. I can just come and decide and put 13 pixels. This 13 pixels means this 13 pixels is going to work all around. And let me refresh this and see what we have here. This is 13 pixels all around. Okay, 13 pixels is going to work all around. So for our case, let's go with 14 by 16. Okay, you can play around with it and know which one fits for your work. Let's go 14 by 16 pixel. 14 by 16 pixel. If I save this now and I refresh, this is what we have. So let's just go with this. Now the next thing I want now is I want to take away text decoration. Notice when you look at our text, there's this line decorating the link. I want to take it out, so I'm going to put something called what, text decoration. Text decoration to be what, none. That means I don't want any lines to it. So I'm going to save this. If I refresh, notice there's no longer lines here. Okay, let's make progress. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm also going to add font size. So let's give it a font size. Let's add it to font size. Let's give it a font size of let's give it a font size of 17 pixel. 17 pixel. Let me save that. Font size of 13 pixel. And if I refresh this, you can see it's going to grow bigger. Okay, you just saw it. Now the next thing we can do now too is okay, basically our nav bar is okay. Our navigation bar is very much okay. So this is what we have produced so far. So this is our working navigation bar of our page. But this our navigation bar is not responsive, so we'll talk about that on next classes. Now the next thing we can add to is that we can make something called a hover. Hover is simply a property that allows you to indicate if you are actually hovering over a text. Let me just do that so that you understand. So let me copy this class. So we are still working our class top nav var. Yeah, I'm going to call h hover. So that a hover simply means that I want to, every time I hover every time I take my mouse and I scroll over the elements of the A, because these elements of A, this particular thing should happen. So over the hover property. So I can add background color to hover. You can actually add color to hover. So I can say if I hover over it, it should become red. Okay. So if I save this now, notice if I come over, it's going to become red. Refresh. See, if I come over here, it's turning to red. Okay, that is that. So I can actually add a color to, not just a background color. I can say whenever I come to it, let that text change, because if I come over now, you can see that it's only the background changes, the white color does not change. Let me say, I can say, okay, if I come over, let that text change from white to green. So let's say green. Let's say change from white to green. Let's save that. And I refresh. Now whenever I come over here, notice it's changing to green whenever I hover. The background changes to red, and the color itself changes to green. Maybe green is not visible. Let's make something yellow. Let's have yellow. Refresh. Now you can see it changes to what? Yellow. Okay, so that is basically, we have done our navigation bar basically with CSS. So from the next lecture, I'm going to be giving us videos on CSS 3. CSS 3. Okay, nice having you. The next video will be uploaded shortly on CSS 3.